What's up everyone, it's Q from Retro Q Gaming, and I have great news for you if you are a fan or collector of the indie darling Axiom Verge. So first off, what is Axiom Verge? Axiom Verge is a Super Metroid clone which released originally a few years ago on PC, PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and even the Wii U and PlayStation Vita. That's right, a game that actually came out on the Wii U and PlayStation Vita. Absolute madness, I know. Anyway, so because it's a Super Metroid clone, no, it is not a Metroidvania game, because you cannot call a game that is basically trying to ape and emulate Super Metroid, and not just the style of both games, you can not call that a Metroidvania game. For the simple reason is, first off, I think Metroidvania should not exist as a subgenre, and second, here's a little fun fact, I've had people call me stupid, call me an idiot, call me all sorts of random crap, because I refuse to acknowledge Super Metroid as a Metroidvania game. First off, okay, it's the second game in the series that created essentially the whole, I'm using air quotes here, Metroidvania style, because they're Metroid games. And second, how can it be a Metroidvania game if it predates the first Castlevania game that used that style to create the whole Metroidvania mishmash? Because let's face it, Super Metroid released as the second game in the Metroid series in March I should say, of 1994, whereas Castlevania Symphony of the Night, the first game in the Castlevania series to use the Super Metroid style, released 3 years later in March of 1997. So no, Super Metroid is not a Metroidvania game. It is a Metroid game, Metroid is a Metroid game, and Axiom Verge is a Metroid-style ape. It's that simple. Now, anyway, back onto the actual topic. So, for all those people out there who have been wanting a physical edition of Axiom Verge, good news is in here for you. And not only that as well, Axiom Verge, because it was one of the most well-received titles, as well as on the Wii U, it was one of the few titles that actually released, was always a prime candidate, or at least a highly vocalized version was asked for. Was highly vocalized? That's not the right way of saying it. Anyway, they were always asked for the Switch. Apparently the Switch version was almost complete, and it could have been a launch title. Allegedly Nintendo didn't certify it quick enough. That's beside the point anyway. So, good news for all you Axiom Verge fans out there, or at least the ones of you out there who play on PS4, PS Vita, Wii U, or now, yes, Nintendo Switch. So, Thomas Happ Games, basically, because Axiom Verge is developed all by one guy, he has now announced that Axiom Verge will have a Multiverse Edition. So, it's coming to a physical collector's edition on Wii U, PS Vita, PS4, and yes, for the first time, Nintendo Switch. So what's going to be included in this Multiverse Edition? Well, it's going to include a bunch of stuff, including a specially commissioned documentary by 2Player Productions regarding and detailing the making of the game, as well as also included in the deluxe booster package or deluxe package is a booklet with developer commentary and artwork, as well as a double-sided poster and a CD soundtrack. Now, it is important to note that the CD soundtrack is bundled by default with the Switch version, whereas on the Wii U, the PS Vita, the PlayStation 4 versions, they are offering the CD as a pre-order incentive. So it's not included with the Wii U, PS Vita, or PS4 versions by default, but it is included with the Axiom Verge version. Now, when it comes to the actual documentary, we do have a little bit of details about it, and Thomas Happ, the developer, he had this to say in relation to what the documentary will cover and what it entails. So here's what he had to say. People often ask me about the early days of Axiom Verge, about how I was able to make a game completely on my own over the course of 5 years of evenings and weekends while holding down a full-time job. The long-form documentary format really made it possible for me to take the time and explain the process, as well as go into some detail about the difficulties of balancing work and family responsibilities. Okay, so that's pretty much good news for any Axiom Verge fans out there. However, there is one thing I do want to mention that I specifically left out to the end of this portion of the video. So, the Axiom Verge Multiverse Edition currently has no release date that I could find, at least on the initial announcement. It is coming to PS4, PS Vita, Wii U, and Nintendo Switch, as I mentioned. Now, the PS4, PS Vita, and Wii U versions of the Multiverse Edition will retail for €29.99, $29.99 or £24.99. Now the Switch version will physically be available for €39.99, which is also assuming $39.99 and probably, let's see, maybe £30, maybe £32. It's hard to tell because of the individual conversions and how they treat them. But more important to note is that the Switch version is more expensive. Now, you could argue that it's because the CD is going to be included by default. But at the end of the day, if people pre-order the other copies, they're still getting the CD for the cheaper price. So I don't really feel that's a fair argument, because let's be honest, 99% of the people who are going to buy Axiom Verge Multiverse Edition are already going to pre-order it. So not just so they can get the CD, but just because they're the kind of people and the kind of fan who would want to pre-order this kind of thing. So where does this leave us with Switch games being more expensive? If you remember Rhyme had to pull some kind of, it was originally $10, €10 more expensive, and they had to pull a little bit of inclusive shenanigans just to kind of try justify the Switch version of it. And I don't think that's right. So this now joins Axiom Verge now joins the list of indie games, which are now more expensive. And that's a concern for a lot of people. Many of the reasons have usually been ruled down to, or many of the examples, I should say, are usually ruled down to manufacturing costs of the game cards. Personally, I don't think that to be too true or too exact, but it's probably more so Nintendo's publishing cost and publishing cut, if you ask me. But that's also just a wild theory. So is this going to set a negative trend? For the simple reason is, I believe this is, off the top of my head, the second game that has done something like this, but I want to say there's more. I just can't recall any specific examples at the moment. So is this a negative trend that we're going to see through the entire life cycle of the Nintendo Switch? Are we going to be paying more for less, essentially? I say more for less because usually it means, this is not an attack, but most people will probably take it at that, is if you compare a Nintendo Switch game to a version on another console, like say the PlayStation 4 or Xbox One, it will technically usually be the inferior version of the game. When I say inferior, I usually mean it would have a slightly lower resolution or frame rate or both, or potentially missing features. But that's not the subject of this video. It is simply what it is. And when you look at it, are you okay with paying more for less? Not paying more for the same, but more for less. Now, I realize in Axiom Verge's case, most people won't care, and it's usually down to, oh, I don't care how much this costs. If this was €60, I'd still buy it. I realize that. I personally have indulged in situations like that. Right now, I'm waiting on this I can never pronounce this correctly because Japanese, the Suiken Densetsu collection from Japan. I cannot read Japanese, but Secret of Mana is my favorite game ever, so I want to pay to have a physical version and support Square Enix and own a related product to my favorite game ever. So it makes perfect sense why people would be okay with this in the collectors and the personal aspect of it. But overall, in general, most people will probably realize, hey, I could buy this version, which is more expensive and not as good, or I can pay less and get a better version that possibly looks better and plays better. So is this going to be a negative trend that we're going to see? I realize I've said that a couple of times at this point now. Let me know in the comments section below, both on, or not just both, but on your feelings related to Axiom Verge, on your feelings related to this Multiverse Edition, on your feelings related to the cost of certain Switch games being more expensive despite what you're actually getting with them, as well as the individual case of Axiom Verge. Are you going to buy the Switch version even though it's more expensive just because you want a physical Switch version? Also, I will say as well, if you look at the actual picture I had earlier, as well as we'll put up right now, the Axiom Verge Multiverse Edition box for the Switch is cool. I really like the Switch version, even though it's like just a little bit smaller. I think it's really cool. That's all I can say. It reminds me of my Persona 2 Collector's Edition box on PSP. Anyway, that's beside the point. Let me know all of that stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. You can follow me on Twitter. Details in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I will see you on the rest of the videos in my channel.